for the team. Well, ladies, I'm so excited about discussing this particular book, especially as y'all, for those that don't know, I am an English teacher. That's why I got made the joke about free books English teachers run. But to have this particular book by Zora Neale Hurston, Barracoon, was an eye opener. So we're just going to dive right in and just tell you some of the good things that we found out about this book and why we love this book. And since Nigeria is our resident Zora Neale Hurston, expert, lover, fight us on everything that we did, Zora Neale Hurston, I'm going to let her go ahead and open us up about the book.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I'm an expert. I'm definitely a fan. If she had Facebook, I'd be a follower and be sharing everything she had. So this book, I think that one of the most important and excellent things about this book is that Barracoon, in a sense, at the time, what she was doing was almost what we seek to do when we do ancestry DNA. Like, he was the last connection that puts us back into Africa. He was one of the last slaves to come over on the last slave ship ever. So she had time and opportunity to interview him, and that's one of the very significant moments in the book, and it's a way to capture what we lost.
All right. Anybody else wanted to add to that?
I think this book is a very important example of testimony, and in this day that we have so much fake news and everyone becomes an expert about things they know nothing about or that they saw on the internet, to see the work that went into that, she describes not only what he talks about, but her process, because this is kind of a scholarly book. She was an anthropologist, and I didn't know that about her. I was actually a little confused when I saw this book. I didn't realize that that's actually what she did. I thought she was a fiction writer. And it took her work to meet with him. He wasn't, easy and excited to, get seen and become famous. He was just living his life out in the country. And, this idea of actually caring about the voice of someone who actually went through something, a very humble man, poor man, went through a lot of tragedy. A lot of people might not be interested in him, but the value of the primary source, particularly in this age of fake news, I think is very important.
It was amazing to have her voice in there as well, of how she would go to his home and bring a gift every time, whether it was watermelon or a ham, and just the showing that she's appreciating his time and his efforts to actually tell his truths to her is something that I feel like is so lost today. In a very simple way of, you don't show up to someone's house without something, whether it's a bottle of wine or some kind of food. It's showing that kind of generosity, and you show that I'm in your home, I'm appreciating, and this is what I have to give, a small token of my appreciation. And it showed that it went a long way with their relationship, because he was always so happy. Like, watermelon, that was a delicacy. Like, how can he afford that? So it was so amazing to hear that throughout the narrative of how they built that relationship.
And I'd have to agree with all the ladies. And then I love how she wrote it in the dialect. Yeah. And when you read it, you actually could feel like you were kind of hearing the voice. I see y'all nodding. So it's like, I've seen some of you have read the book, which is really cool. So it's like when you're reading it, you're really hearing the voices of him and of her, interviewing him, and can kind of visualize being right there. And I think that's one of the biggest things, because I'm a visual person, that I appreciated about the book. Now, one of the bigger things that we pulled away from the book was when we talked about it being a rite of passage. How do you feel like, ladies? How do y'all want to chime in on it being a rite of passage?
Well, I think for me, the rite of passage that I really keyed in on was him talking about his transition when he was at home, and he had the opportunity to participate in the ceremony, but then he also was at a stage where he was not officially a man, even though he went through this ceremony, and he was still, I loved the innocency of it and how he carried something our kids today don't have. He was like, I was only 19. I was Cujo, only 19. I'm not a man yet. And he was able to reflect and be young. And I think part of it also was, you could still see that youthfulness inside of him that was stuck because he didn't have a chance to grow and transition the way that he would have normally and naturally. And so, you know, when we take those things, when we lose those times and opportunities to transition, to grow, and to learn, or when there's trauma, what happens to a person when they're traumatized at a young age? They don't get to experience the traditional full rites of passage. And what would that have really looked like?
Well, I think it kind of links back to the way some of the churches now and then some of the youth organizations are having the rite of passage ceremonies for their young ladies as well as for their young men. And so I appreciated seeing that in the book, because then to me it gave it more validity, because I was like, why are these people doing this? You know, why are they having these rites of passages and talking about putting on rings? And then to read this, and it sounds like it's really in our culture from growing up, coming from across. So how do you guys, well, we want to bring the audience into this, because y'all didn't think y'all just showed up just to be here and gonna listen to us talk the whole time. So what do y'all think about rites of passage ceremonies? Is it something that you would participate in? Is it something that you want? Somebody jump up. Y'all don't be scared. Y'all can participate. We told you we wanted y'all interactive. We got some questions.
Hello. I thought the dialogue was very difficult to decipher. And for me, that brought home just how serious his condition was, because if his dialect was difficult for me to decipher, then nobody understood him when he got here. And his rite of passage was that he was an alien or a stranger in a strange land.
Right.
You know, and that was his rite of passage.
And he had many rites of passages, I thought, because not only, you know, the one to become a man back at home, but losing his liberty, first to the warring tribe that took him, then being taken to another country, being a slave, and then being free and having to negotiate all of that without therapists, you know, back then.
Yeah.
Like he had to do every time.
No therapy.
But back to the dialect part, what was really amazing is that even when there are times that I would get kind of caught up in not reading as fluidly, I would sound it out loud. So I would actually read the passage aloud, and that experience made it like very tangible, and it had that feeling of that circular storytelling that we and the Black diaspora speak of so much.
It was never released when she wrote it. And it was not released and it wasn't published because of the dialect. And the publishers wanted to give her a deal, but they would only give her a deal if she took it out. And she was so willing and found it so important to honor the actual voice of Black people in this country and what happens when we take on a language that is not our own, and how we have been able to, though, create something out of the nothing that we had. So I think that it was really a special piece that we have there.
So my question to some of the authors that are out there, and please jump up, how would you deal with that situation if you had something that you wanted to write and stood so strongly on it? Would you still put it in the vault, or would you conform?
Well, actually, I am author Marita Berry, and I've written a book based on the islands, Caribbean islands. So when I was doing the dialect, I wanted to put that little accent into the words. But when I gave it to my critiquing group, a lot of them was kind of confused. Well, what does CHILE mean? And it's supposed to mean child, the way they say it, you know, child. But and children, CHIRREN, they couldn't understand.
And I'm from Texas, and we say children too.
Yeah. So I gave in and I changed it around a little, but I kept a couple like me in there or instead of I or whatever, but I kind of gave in.
You kind of gave in? I got another hand?
I just wanted to say, based on what she was saying, wouldn't it depend on your audience? Because again, I guess writing, I'm a beginner. I would want my readers to understand and get the message that I was trying to relay. So to me, I think it would be based on your audience.
Well, according to Zora Neale Hurston, she wrote several books and was in dialect, and she knew who her audience was. But it's like, but what do you stand on? I think it goes into what are your beliefs and how strong are you in what you're writing to take that stand.
Well, is that like a chance you're taking?
It definitely is a chance you're taking, but it's like how committed are you to your message? How committed are you to your stance? And how committed are you? For her, it was all about authenticity.
And I think in this case, as he was the last cargo and that this wasn't fiction, she was really just trying to capture the facts for us. I think it was probably even more important that she did not change things versus in a novel.
Right. And we have a comment on the front. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I think that I would leave it in if it was integral to the story. This is just another language. I think now we call it code switching.
I love that you mentioned that. So the miss before, you mentioned who am I writing for? Like, it depends if my audience, and I'm not an author like these wonderful ladies. I'm the only one who is not published. But that gave me the question of who are you writing for? And for me, as a non-author, is it if I'm writing for myself in my art form, or am I writing as a business venture to particular audiences?
That's just like when we read a book that used a lot of patois. I was not, or did I say that correctly? I hope I did. I wasn't familiar with that, but we had somebody else that was on the set that did. So in my opinion, stay true to what you're writing, because then it opens up the conversation. Now, one part that really struck me in the book too is that even though he was grieving, he dealt with a lot of grief and a lot of loss, more than just being ripped away from his home. But how do you deal with grief as much as he dealt with? For those that are familiar with the book, y'all could go ahead and chime in on the grief part, the grieving theme.
I mean, my impression is that was more a way of life. I mean, people's children died young. That's why people had lots of children back in the day. Life expectancies were shorter. So dealing with grief was a part of life.
And then at the same time, it was loss upon loss upon loss. He lost his whole family was murdered. Then he came to America. I'm sure he experienced death and loss on the plantations. And then his whole family that he had created died. But he had a very profound way of dealing with things. And there's one moment when he's like when you feed the earth, it never gives you anything back. It's not going to spit the food up. They're gone, they're dead, they're there, which he was not looking for them to. We often think about maybe, sometimes that they're going to communicate with us, the dead are going to talk to us, this is going to happen. And he's like, she's asking him about being a pagan. And he's like, what? Miss, they're not talking. Nobody's coming back. We're not having no conversation. I got to move on with my life. They're gone.
And what's interesting is that I would never be able to relate to that amount of loss. And I hope no one else here can ever be able to directly relate to that. But what in my own sense of when I'm looking at my life is the amount of times anytime I wake up or I turn on my phone or I look on my computer, in my inbox from email to any other messages is filled of news like that, of how we are massacred for no reason. And that's the type of trauma I feel like brought that out in me from this book. What's interesting in this book, like I can't relate, but no one can relate to him and what he's going through. Exactly. He can't ever verbalize what he's seeing. And that's crazy.
Yeah. And the other side of that too is that on social media, it gets things that upset people get curated out. So, now we're living in a time where the news that people are seeing, if they don't want to hear about police shootings because it upsets them, they will not be shown that. Yep, exactly. And so they know nothing about it. So they're watching The Bachelorette.
Right.
Because, that keeps them engaged, on the social media, and then people who get engaged watching it. So there's an opportunity for more understanding, and then there becomes this widening of the lack of understanding because we're just seeing completely different things.
Well, we have some responses too on Facebook Live. Laverne said, absolutely, Janelle, regarding an author telling his or her story for herself. So Laverne was definitely agreeing. And she said also that a lot of grief, he stuck to his culture and lessons of his elders. So basically she's agreeing with you guys as well. And then Laverne said, Dr. Dina, the experience Kaswala had weren't foreign, but I think death for true Africans are different. Remember, he said that his wife was his eyes. That's a beautiful line in the book. His wife was his eyes. So in other words, she could see what he couldn't see, and she helped them make it through some of those hard situations. And so my question was, do you have somebody like that that's in your life that you may have lost? Because he lost a whole lot, and it wasn't like just simple loss. It's like one of his sons was a victim of
Police brutality.
back then. So it's like it actually showed that, that took me to go back to what Janelle said. That took me aback as well, because we're writing about police brutality back in the 1900s, and we're in 2018 still talking about police brutality. So that took me aback in the book as well. So that was where we were in the question.
I can say a little bit about grieving and grief. I am an author, poet, and I also am a book publicist, but I do want to say that I understand that level of grief. I lost one of my sisters she was 46, and it just really changed everything in many ways. She was kind of my eyes, because a lot of times she would see things I wouldn't. And I would say that's the point where I really went inside. And I would say that's when the poet in me was born, because literally I think I was so overcome with that emotion that I began to write. I think grief can either overcome you, or it can cause a rebirth in you, and amazing ability to find that inner strength. So I haven't read the book yet, but I'm sitting here really wanting to read that book, and that topic of grief really really impacted me, because I've been through certainly nothing like him, but certainly know that feeling of huge loss. I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. We have one lady. We have two hands. Oh, three. Look at us.
I think in his situation, coming out of slavery, that we were taught as coming out of bondage, you just had to keep going. You couldn't stop. You had no choice. Your grief was something you put on your back with all the other baggage you had to carry, and kept moving. So that's why I think his way of dealing with grief was interpreted, the way he moved, the way he dealt with it.
Charlotte says, it means that I am adapting my deceased mother's ways of perceiving situations and reacting with calm and not fire and anger. I am seeing life through my mother's eyes as I see her in my mirror reflection and my body language. Wow, her mom was definitely her eyes. And then Laverne said, amen, Charlotte. For me, my sister is my eyes. She has been on my life journey with me for these last few years. I trust and respect her eyes.
I have a friend that I've never seen grief handled this way. She had a fiance that he was a firefighter, and he died in the line of work. And she had loved him so that to this day, I would say, if sabotage is the word, she doesn't get close to anyone for fear of losing that person. And I've never looked at grief that way. So it's a really fine line of how people handle grief. I had a daughter that passed away when she was 13. And I think I don't want any more kids.
Right.
And it's not that I don't want any more kids, but to deal with that, I'm not going through that again.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. Yes.
Grief.
Yes.
I'm a pastor.
Okay.
I get to talk to people about grief, and we are taught to give them that famous passage in the Bible. Weeping may endure for a night,
but joy
gonna come in the morning. But it's not until you experience the death of someone whose eyes you were looking through.
Right.
I'm number 5 of 8 girls, but my sister number 3 was my eyes. And until I lost that one, who was my ride or die, did I not really understand that scripture that I always gave. Because she was the eyes that could see things I couldn't see and pull me off the ledge when I went to go crazy. And you can't tell a person how long to grieve.
Exactly.
You really can't, because you may handle it one way, and they may handle it another. But you can't let grief take you out. As the young lady said, you've got to come to a point where you need to move on.
How do you identify that person? How do you know before then?
I identified it really early not really early, but I've been pastoring now since '94. In her talking to me, I identified that this was going to be the one, my go-to. My best friend in life is Sharon Lucas. She's the other one who could pull me off the edge. She is my eyes.
I call those people the ones that keep me grounded and keep me true. Because those are usually your friends that are not your yes friends. Because we all got those. Yes. Yes. We got another. Yes. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Eartha.
Hey, Eartha.
Hi, I'm an author. Number one, I'll be honest, I was not ready for this conversation this morning, but I do feel I have something to offer because I am a walking, living testimony from grief. Gotcha. I lost 7 very close family members within the same year, including mom and dad in the same week.
Wow.
I was a college student, broke, living in the dorm. And I went through all the phases of grief, especially with mom and dad. My mom was my eyes. You have to find something to hold on to cause you to move forward and not let it paralyze you.
Most
and
definitely.
I'm a witness to that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And it's okay. You can tell us your story because we're telling your story
right
here at the T. It's about the book, but it's about us and our experience in our lives and how we can use these books to connect to experience and understand one another and understand and unpack our experiences.
Awesome. And then Charlotte said, Laverne said, one of the scenes that will be with me for a minute was Dahomey attacking his village. What is that? Because we are attacking our own today. What does it mean?
Well, could not stand that king for 1 minute. I'm gonna get into the vernacular because he was a sucker. Like, he was using his power, abusing his power, and it was because people who abuse their power, they don't have any real power inside of themselves.
But
and I think that that's the same case in and of today. When you look at times where we attack each other, when I used to teach. And a lot of my students were in gangs, and every conversation I had with them, what exactly are y'all fighting about? Because nobody here owns anything in this community. This is not your block. You don't own anything here. But you want to feel like you have some power, so you attack someone else whom you perceive has no power or less power than you, so you can feel more empowered. And even then, one of the warriors said to him, the king said to him, why did you come here at night? If you really wanted to do something, you really wanted a problem, where was that in the daytime? Where were you in the daytime? Why did you come when we were not guarded, when we were unaware, when this could be really easy for you? Because you have no strategy, you have no strength, you really are a weak person. And when we attack one another, that's when we're showing our weakness. That's when we're really showing our frailty.
And well, I think also too, and it's interesting because they had the female warriors, which were in Black Panther. And, it was interesting the contrast of taking the narrative from Africans were only the victims. I think Alice Walker says this in the book, of slavery, but also participating. And just, I think that's a human nature thing because slavery has occurred all over the world in every culture. In this country, it became a racial thing. Slave equals Black, and that is not true. Vikings had slaves. They say that Iceland was probably a sex slave colony from the Vikings going from Scandinavia, kidnapping women from Ireland and Scotland and taking them there when they look at the genetic studies. So I think it's also just looking that is the capacity to do something, as horrific as slavery is in everyone. And to me, I think it was important to think of that as a human thing rather than that keeping it at that kind of narrative.
Well, ladies, we want to thank you guys, but we got one big question for you now. If Zora Neale Hurston was here today, what would you share with her, or what would you tell her?
I think Zora Neale Hurston was the first author who really made me feel like it was okay to be completely myself.
Wow.
And never, ever apologize for my choices or my preferences. After I really started reading, not necessarily just Zora, but other Black authors, like I let my hair grow natural. Like I really started to feel comfortable in my own skin. And I think that's what Zora does, especially like in stories like Sweat and her other works. She makes me feel like I can just be unapologetically myself. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of Black girls ever experience that. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I was like maybe early 30s that I really started to feel like I could walk in who I am and not apologize and not care if people didn't. You either get on board or you get lost. Like, that's really my attitude. But I wasn't always like that. So, you know, I feel empowered when I read Zora Neale Hurston. Like, she makes me feel like it's okay for me to not apologize for anything that I am. So
awesome. Yes. We have one
I don't even know if I'd have a question. I just want to sit and take in her aura, because she was she just had such a power from her writings. She has such a powerful aura about her. I just would want to just sit there and be like basking in the sunlight.
Right.
You know.
That's true. I feel like if she was here today and you'd sit in a room with her, it would be like meeting someone for the first time who knows more about you than you about your own self.
Right.
Because she has done so much research, her work, and this is just one testimony to, this is like just a drop in the bucket of what she's done. And she knows more about my history, my background, what makes me irk, what makes me shine, than I probably know for years, right? I have to grow into that, but she knows the root of who I am.
I have to totally agree, because the picture that's on the back of the book, it just made me zone in. Like, I want to be sitting in that room with her. It's like, come on, girl, let's talk. You know. So, anybody else wanted to? Yes, we have one in the front. Okay.
My favorite line by her is, "They will kill you and then tell people you liked it."
Wow.
Even though that's not in this book,
yes,
I feel like that exemplifies this book, and exemplifies that line, because every place in his life, they attempted to kill him, and then they attempted to dehumanize him, and then they attempted to make him less than what he was, and he still feels like, I can pick up the dirt because that's what I'm a part of, and as long as I'm a part of the dirt, as long as I'm a part of the world, you cannot kill me and then tell people that I liked it because I'm still here. And I would want to hug her and kiss her.
If she was standing here, I would want to tell her thank you. Through her stories, we were able to pull something from her stories that was deeper than just words on a page and just entertainment. You felt like you were getting a piece of the culture and a piece of our people that is trying to be erased constantly. Right. And for that, they can never take that from her. So that's why her legacy is going to go on the way it is, because she gifted us something that we didn't even know we needed, that them back then didn't even know they needed. And so I would tell her thank you.
And especially even today, there are a lot of people who still don't know that we need that. So even when you're coming to the office, or I know when I walk in my office, hair like this or big afro, and it's like, I'm just as capable. And I'm here, and we're just going to keep on going with that, because it's from all of her other works, and like the young lady in the back, just when you're reading works by people who know you or look like you or have similar experiences, that's what gives you that confidence and that courage to reawaken and just walk in your own self.
And maybe now the world is ready to receive this gift. We weren't ready when she was alive and when she initially wrote it.
I've already been telling people about it. I've already been telling people to get it.
Yes, ma'am.
There is a Zora festival.
Oh, wow.
That is held every year in the oldest city in America, Eatonville. And we make sure, I live in Orlando, Florida, and we make sure our children go to that festival every year to walk through, to see her works, to read her works, to feel a part of it. And if you've never experienced it, you will get to know Zora in the present time as it was back then.
I would thank her so much for everything that she sacrificed, because, I'm sorry, y'all, but I really love her work. I love her passion, and anybody, I know I see a few, my friends, who I've met before the tea, and if you know me, you know that I'm all about the passion. I'm about doing what really sets your heart and soul on fire. and you feel free. And whatever you have to sacrifice, you have to sacrifice. And she did that, and she lived that, and she lived that so that we could live that, and so that we could have these stories, and so that we could know who we are and what we were and where we come from. And I would tell her, thank you. And I would tell her, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that nobody appreciated what you were doing the way that they were supposed to then, because I don't think anybody told her sorry. I don't think she had a chance to really receive that and be supportive in what she was doing. She had patrons and she had people who, funded her work, but there was a time when that all stopped. So, who were her friends? Who was there for her? And so I would really thank her, but also let her know that I'm so sorry that this, happened to you.
And we had one more hand on this side.
But what I really want to say is, and I was thinking identity with the hair, the natural hair now, and the, the knowledge that we're important, our culture is important. All of that really is reflective of when I was coming up. I'm a 60s, 70s girl, with the big afros and the dashikis and all of that. It's just trending again. The unfortunate thing is that it's a lot of us who lost that connection. And it's coming back to us, which is beautiful. I see all these beautiful girls with the natural hair. Me, I fought it, but actually my hair is natural now. It's just being blown out. And I got that from my last trip here to this reading event. They had this thing on your hair being natural, and they were all walking around here pretty with this pretty afro. Look at her gorgeous hair right now. and I was saying, and I have two beautiful daughters whose hair is natural. And you know what I told them? It skipped a generation. My hair won't look like yours. And then I got it done. And then I can still wear it like this, and it's still natural, and my hair is healthy. I just want to thank you guys. This is just, I'm just telling you, this is really sweet. I've seen you guys online when you first started it. We met you last year.
Yes.
Here. So I'm just saying, this is just evolving. You girls are the bomb. I'm excited about that. And listen, in the future, I'm going to read my darn book before I come to this year.
Well, we're going to make sure we post it early next time. Well, guys, we want to thank you guys for joining us and making this such a special, special time. And we want to thank the person that's over this, Miss Sharon Lucas, for having us. Because Sharon really made it possible for us to be with you guys today, because we wanted to come out and share what we're doing here at the T with everyone else, so you can jump on board. And we want to thank you for following us and logging in and joining in our conversation.
And if you're not already following us on Facebook, like us, love us, comment, share, follow us on Instagram, and make sure you tell everybody to come and join the T.
Hashtag join the T.
Hashtag everything you do today. So, who's telling your story?
The T!